Hey you guys, this is Dr. Cheryl Meyer. We're gonna go back to the new man. Look, I just had to show you guys. I had to turn this on. I had to hurry up and look at this. The sun just set. The time changed here, so I was looking up where we left off, and I'm like, but the sun already set. But it's so beautiful. I wanted to get some of it in. I was just in the mood. I try to read something new not new every day, but just something outside of my normal thoughts, because it takes you to a higher place than your patterns that you have in your mind. And so that's why I just share it with you guys, because I totally want to read this and just be in this place. But let's look at the scenery. Oh, I hope you guys can see the pink clouds. There's the moon. All right, I'm gonna have to I was looking for a flashlight in my car too, but I don't have one. So we'll just read, and then there's a light over here. I'll go back in my car like I do, you know. You guys watch the ocean for a little bit while it's still visible. I hope you're well. It's great to see you again. Some people are watching this in the playlist, so I'll just start reading, because you don't need an introduction every video. I think the mic's on this side, so I'll just put it towards the ocean. Ah, you guys gotta see this. I gotta get closer, because the sandbar here is pretty high. All right, chapter 7. Oh, if I had a flashlight, I could go on that dock right there, the lifeguard dock, and just get all cozy. All right, I'm in chapter 8. We just finished chapter 7. So it's chapter 8. Hopefully you didn't leave already. All right, so many references. This is the idea of prayer. This is Maurice Nicoll. It's like an esoteric book called The New Man. It teaches you how it's like Christ was always teaching about transformation and alchemy and higher consciousness, but so many people have lost the deeper teachings that he was offering us. And they minimize. They're still teaching something, but they minimize it. They're teaching 10% maybe of what he's teaching. And anyway, so many references are made to prayer in the Gospels that it is useful to select some of them. Together and try to gain an idea of what was taught by Christ about the meaning of prayer and the conditions necessary for it to obtain any response. Prayer is directed to what is above a man, to what is at a higher level than himself, we have already seen that the language of parables, as used in the Gospels, conveys meaning from a higher to a lower level. Prayer is conveying meaning from a lower to a higher level. The one is heaven communicating with earth, and the other is earth trying to communicate with heaven. And since we have also seen that there is a difficulty in the communication of this higher with the lower, we shall not be surprised to find that there is a similar difficulty in the communicating of the lower with the higher. The two levels are not in contact. Well, that's really refreshing. I'm already not being able to see because it's just dusk, and so let me talk about that. So we're doing something, you know. It's so good to see you. All right. So I think he's going to talk about, if I remember it from before, bringing a net, throwing a net up. Up to the heavenly realms. This isn't about performance. It's just like, how do I explain it? As a psychologist, I've been a psychologist the last 20 years, is when I'm talking about, so today, let's say, this is exactly it. I was meditating for an hour on being under the standard of Christ. It was, it's a certain prayer of St. Ignatius in the exercises of St. Ignatius. And he talks about being under the flag or the standard of Christ, or being under the standard of the enemy, which just wants to steal and is just, it's like the energy of angry and promising the world and yet trying to take everything from you because all it wants is to destroy you, but it doesn't look like that on the outset. And so, of course, I was meditating for an hour, and then what happened next is I went to this random Zoom. It's not random, but these guys, these people that are in, women and men that are in this group with me, they had a Zoom, and I was like, oh, I'll join them because we're all going to a conference in a couple days. And so they were preparing for it, and I went in, and of course it's like this Tony Robbins thing, and they played Tony Robbins a clip, and he was saying, you know, how our cells regenerate every 5 years or 2 years or something like this, and how to raise your standard. Are you going to raise your standard and live at a higher level, and live at a level you never lived at before? And commit to living at that level instead of this old level, which is just a pattern of your old beliefs and limitations and things like that. And so, are you willing to commit like that? And this was like a minute, you know. This thing started at the end. My timer went off for my meditation because I set aside an hour to be over, and then suddenly this guy, and of course it's because you're in that vibration, I heard the word, are you going to live at a new standard, a different way than I would normally hear it? Because I heard like the standard of Christ, because St. Ignatius was explaining really deeply what the standard of Christ is. Are you willing to fight under the standard? It's a very high standard, and it's one where you're choosing to face whatever comes under that standard. If St. Ignatius, he was a fighter. He wanted to be like a knight type of person. You know, he was an army person before he got injured, and then he, you know, the only thing in his recovery house was the spiritual book, and he wanted a romance novel. This is what happens. And so he got that, and he considered following Christ like being in an army, and he compared it to the nobility of fighting for a good cause. And he talks about, you know, letting go the bitterness it is to our flesh to let go of running after money or fame or people fussing after us or giving us sensual pleasures, so we have no problems in our life or whatever, if we're just running after that. But what I'm saying is, like, when by grace, or whatever you want to call it, I was taken up into a higher mindset. By grace and discipline, you're setting aside the time to do this, to be present in this way, to let go of all other distractions best you can, like you're doing now, and enter into a different mindset. Well, when I did that, I gravitate other things, I magnetize other things of that nature to show up, or my mind, if it's an alpha state or something like this, is going to, or the Holy Spirit, or however you call it, will highlight other things. So I heard Tony different than I would ever hear him on a different day, because I have been meditating on living my life according to the standard, which is the flag of Christ, and he was talking about, are you willing to live at a higher standard? And I just smiled inwardly, because I'm like, yeah, this is the higher standard that we're all called to, instead of giving our life away to sell out, I love Latoya says, like, I danced for the devil for so long and in so many ways. He just told me where to jump, and I jumped, like pleasing other people and performing and, running after other people, their acceptance and being popular in society or in the moment, it's just so. Do you choose? Do you freely choose to live by a different standard? That's your choice. But I have a feeling Maurice Nicoll is going to go into that more. What I was going to say is that, you see, by me being at a higher level of consciousness, I heard what Tony Robbins was saying on a higher level of consciousness, whether he knew that he was speaking of that consciousness or not. This is why I use songs to teach lessons, because the people singing the songs are getting these songs from a higher realm anyway, whether they know it or not. Anyway, okay, let's go back. So let us again remind ourselves that the central conception of man in the Gospels is that he's an unfinished creation, capable of reaching a higher level by a definite evolution, which must begin by his own efforts, and that their entire teaching, the Gospels, is about what must be done for this to be effected. In this light, the Gospels are nothing but a series of instructions that concern a possible and definite pre-established psychological development that man is capable of, and one that, if he begins to set himself to the task of its fulfillment, opens his eyes and makes him see in which direction his full meaning lies. And let us also remind ourselves that the attainment of this higher level possible for man is called heaven, or the kingdom of heaven in the Gospels, and that it is within a man. The kingdom of heaven is within. What does Bob Marley say? Man is a universe within himself.
Oh, he's running for governor. He's running for governor.
So it's within a man, as a possibility of his own inner evolution or rebirth of himself, and that man, at the level he is on, as an inner evolution or rebirth of himself. And that man, people were walking by. At the level he is on, as an unawakened creature, an unfinished experiment, is called earth. See, we want to go to the heaven instead of just the earth. There are the two levels, the higher and the lower, and some very great differences exist between them. As great as the differences between a seed and a flower, quite the difference. The communication between the two levels is difficult. I mean, don't manifest that it's difficult, because grace, with God, all things are possible. He'll say it's all this effort, but I think that the Holy Spirit, or however you understand this, if we're made out of the spark of God, that God part in us will call us to these higher places. And there's going to be like this restlessness or this longing in us to go to these deep places. And so as you yield to that instead of to your flesh and running after all the things that make you feel like you're in control and in power and popular or whatever in your flesh, as you let go of that and reach for this, then help comes to you. Oh, this might be my friend. Drew!
Hey, what are you doing?
Just give me a hug. Are you hugging today? I'm making a video. I'm in the middle of it.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, much love.
Did you see what we did? Oh, I haven't showed you. I'll send you pictures.
Send me. But I'm
good?
I'm in the middle of a video, yeah.
Oh.
I'm reading a book.
Oh, it's good to see you.
I thought that was your speaker. Great to see you. Yeah, send me a picture. Bye, sweetheart. I love him. I love him so much. It's just so funny. I noticed his speaker. We often skate to that and dance to that. That's how it happens here, you guys. What I was just talking about, the vibe matches, because that's Drew. I love him. All right, so if you look at my videos on Instagram, I'm doing the trapeze with Drew. He's the best. He just made a mandala in the sand, that will wash away tomorrow, but he dug it so that people can see the pattern and it wakes up higher understanding in your inner man. That's what he does. And so of course this is how these videos get made, is they show up. That's what I was just saying, and that's what this chapter, I know it's going to be teaching us. When you're in that vibration, when you're in that level of consciousness, then that's how help comes to you. I was just talking to you about how help comes to you. You see how Drew came to me. I was just talking about being drawn in by the spirit to these deeper things and to love. I didn't know he was coming here. We'll usually text each other if we're gonna skate, but I didn't know if I was gonna skate or not, so I never texted our chain. Anyway, that's rad. Okay, so the mission of Christ was to bridge, to connect. Okay, part of this mission of Christ, was to bridge, to connect, and so bring into correspondence in himself these two levels, the divine and the human. And of this we will speak in another place. But it can be said here that unless this connection is made by a few at certain intervals in time, all communication with the higher fails, and man is left without any idea or teachings that can lift him. That is, he is left to his instincts and his self-interest, his violence and his animal appetites, and so without any influences that can lift him beyond the level of barbarism. So I think he's talking some about the higher consciousness, the collective consciousness, and how it, Eckhart Tolle will talk about this too, is it matters one person, one person changing and coming to this level of higher consciousness is like a light that switches on, that and then other people can light by that light, like Drew being a light wakes up the light in me, and my light in me wakes up the light in you, and your light wakes up other people. And so if we all do this, even if we stayed in our own rooms, it would add light to the collective. And it's why, my mom used to be like, why do those monks just sit by themselves and pray? I'm like, Mom, they're getting to a higher level of consciousness, and that helps wake up everybody, whether they're with us or they're not. They're doing it for the collective, and often they would go back into people after like 10 years in the desert or whatever and help. It's all blurry, but it doesn't matter. All right, so the next subheading is the necessity of persistence in prayer. In view of the difficulty of communication between the lower and the higher level, it is possible to understand that direct contact with God is not easy, as religious people often believe. Religious people often think that they can come in contact with a higher level, that is, with God, just as they are. They do not realize that for this to be possible, they must become different. If we're talking about higher consciousness, I want to just say one more thing, is like anytime you have sincere prayer, it says in the Bible, you know, in the Holy Scriptures, that you will be heard. So don't be despairing about what he's saying. This is just his opinion. You know, I think that there's more than what the church will sometimes teach. But it's not like an impossible thing, and it's not about doing, like getting in your doing self, because the mind loves that, the egotism loves that, wants more stuff to do. But we'll see. I'll just trust that it's gonna, more of the whole of the truth is coming out. And Maurice Nicoll doesn't know all of it, but it gets us thinking. So they think that it is with God just as they are. They do not realize that for this to be possible, they must become different. Let us now look at some of the observations made about prayer in the Gospels in connection with the idea that persistence is necessary. One of Christ's disciples asks how to pray, and he says, Lord, teach us how to pray, even as John the Baptist taught his disciples. There is, by the way, no record of how John taught his disciples to pray, not that we know of. Maybe, you know, you can meditate and ask God to reveal that, because why not? Christ says in reply, when you pray, say, Father. I say Father, Mother, but you know, because Yahweh is God, is masculine, feminine. Father, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, and thy will be done. But he doesn't have that here. Give us day by day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, for we ourselves also forgive everyone that is indebted to us, and bring us not into temptation. Like, lead us out from that place. That was from Luke 11, XI, you know, and it's in another passage too, so you can read the different ones, different versions of that. It's very, very similar. Notice how Christ goes on. He says, which of you shall have a friend, and shall go unto him at midnight, and say unto him, Friend, lend me 3 loaves. For a friend of mine is come to me from a journey, and I have nothing to set before him. And he from within shall answer and say, hey, trouble me not. The door is now shut, and my children are with me, you know, in the bed. It's I used to get triggered by that. Not anymore. It's just like Little House on the Prairie, you know, everyone's in their beds. I cannot rise and give to thee. I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him because of his friendship, you know, yet because of his importunity, he will rise and give him as many as he needs. That's Luke 11 as well, right after that, 5-8. Christ emphasizes that persistence is necessary and uses an illustration that seems to suggest that it is as if prayer is addressed to someone who hears but does not wish to be bothered, and is forced to do something only if there is sufficient persistence. That's just how it's being portrayed to us. Maybe because of how our minds operate, you know, it has to get past a barrier, like of this habituated pattern that we have inside of ourselves. We have habitual patterns that keep us locked in, and it's like what I'm getting the sense of is like the cocoon and the butterfly, the caterpillar. If you break open the cocoon, then the butterfly can't fly. It will die because its wings aren't strong enough. It has to break through the cocoon in order to have strong enough wings to fly. And so it's kind of that persistence, you know. It's not because God's being an ass, you know. It's because there's something in us that stays in our ego mind, our lower consciousness. And it's scared to go to a higher level of consciousness because it can't understand it. It's going into a mystery, and this is what it means to have faith, full of faith, you know, believing in the impossible. But it's not just false belief. It's not just empty belief. I'm gonna go in my car because even that light's not enough for me. So, wow, listen to what I just said, you know? Even that light is not enough for me, okay? That's I just prayed their Father's Prayer right before this. So, it's like speak through me, divine, as you will. But it's kind of like we'll see something by a dim light, and if we get a stronger light, we can see more. Or if we had UV light glasses, we could see different things that your normal eye can't see. Or if you have glasses on, you can see even more clearly or sharply. It's kind of like that there's levels of consciousness. This is why people take certain substances and stuff, because then it gets your brain waves to a different state. All right, let's see what I don't want that person's. That might be Drew's car. I don't know. Anyway, let's see. Maybe you'll want to see a person's face. If not, just listen. I had a coaching session today and I was like, I'm so glad you're a live person that I get to talk to, instead of just automated or whatever. All right. So Christ emphasizes that persistence is necessary and uses an illustration that seems to suggest that it is as if prayer is addressed to someone who hears but does not wish to be bothered and is forced to do something only if there is sufficient persistence. And Christ indicates that it is through shameless persistence that a response is obtained. I have tons of this. I beg God for stuff. Beg. And I'm just like, well, then change my heart. If this isn't what you want me to want, help me to want what's highest and best, for everybody, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're feeding, nourishing this deeper part of yourself, Welcome. Subscribe and like and share all of these and start at the beginning and listen to them over and over, or read the book, It's great. Or other ones. The George MacDonald stuff on my channel that book that I read is so good. It teaches you all of this in a fairy story form. I think it's The Princess and the Goblin. All right. And so the same idea, namely that the prayer is not easily answered, is expressed in another. Okay, so here. And Christ indicates that it is through shameless persistence that a response is obtained. The word translated as importunity in Greek, means literally shameless impudence. The same idea, and it takes humility to do this. You just have to be like, God, I'm just asking you. I'm completely bearing my heart to you. And that's weird in our culture, because our culture teaches you to hide those things and not even get in touch with it. People don't even really know their heart's deepest desire, On a wish your heart makes. I think that's in Snow White or something, Look, this is the inside of my purse. Believe in the I'm possible. Live happy. And it says where dreams come true. Right? This is the place. And someone showed us a video today in that Zoom meeting of this girl. She was singing and she said, you don't have to wait for your life to be good, for you to choose to be happy. And she'd been through it. You could just tell by how she was. And so it was like, you can live happy right now. Choose to live happy and not fake happy. I'm not about fake happy, but anyway. So the same idea, namely that prayer is not easily answered, is expressed in another passage. I'm going to turn my car on for a second so the battery doesn't go out. As he spake, okay, here's a quote from Luke 18, 1-5. And he spoke a parable unto them that they ought to, that they ought always to pray and not to faint, saying, there was in the city a judge which feared not God, doesn't fear God, and regarded not man, and there was a widow in that city. And she came often unto him, saying, Avenge me of mine adversary. Bye.
Bye.
I'm reading a book.
Oh, dude, your lights were like on my face.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was like, shit.
Sorry. They go on automatic.
That's awesome. What book are you reading?
I'm reading A New Man. It's esoteric. It's so good.
This is the one I'm reading.
Downloads from the 9. We're probably reading the same thing.
Yeah, they write.
Just a second. He doesn't know I'm taping.
In this book. See how they write in
Oh,
a square?
wow.
So you have to read in a square. Read this way, down that way, up that way.
That's rad.
All the way to the inside.
Awesome.
So it upgrades the optic system.
I want to read that after you. Can I borrow it? Or no? Huh?
When? Right now?
No, some other time.
Yeah, let me finish on like the next...
No, I mean in the next few months.
Yeah,
it's fine.
I'm transcribing it.
Well, I'm taping this, so this is going to be uncut.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah. So it's on a playlist. I'll send it to you.
Okay, downloads from the 9.
All right, see you. I know, right? He's promoting his. That's awesome. He's like my brother. I love him. I love him so much. Sorry about that. I do this unedited, so just if you listen to this again, fast forward through that part. I thought he understood that it was, I didn't know my life. Anyway, I'll stop talking so we get into this. Oh, see, that's what happened when I turned on my car. The lights went on him. So there was in the city this judge that feared not God and regarded not man, and there was a widow in that city, and she came often and saying to him, Avenge me of mine adversary. And he would not for a while. But afterwards he said within himself, Though I fear not God, nor regard man, yet because this widow troubled me, right, I will avenge her, lest she wear me out by her continual coming. So he's like, I'm going to give her this because she just keeps coming and she's going to wear me out. So a parallel is drawn between the widow who asks for justice from a judge who acts only because he is forced in order to save himself trouble, and the man who prays to God. All this means that prayer is not easily answered. Something like that. It doesn't necessarily mean exactly that, but barriers exist. Help is not easily obtained. Christ tells his disciples in many places to pray continually. You know, I look at that like stay in the state of consciousness, in this deeper isness, the deeper essence of yourself. I did a 5-minute video today after I listened to something that Eckhart Tolle was saying about that. It was so beautiful, like what he was saying. I love it. I love it. It's like break your patterns. That's what that video is called. But it's about getting into this deeper essence within yourself. And then you see the deeper essence in all life. And then things like Drew just shows up, you know? Anyway, all the time, things like that will gravitate towards you. I couldn't like turn my camera really. I didn't want to turn the camera so you could see his book was, it's like written like this. You have to read in circles to get to the middle, you know, because, anyway, it's like the mandala that he just made. You know, of course, he'd have a book that operates just like a mandala. Okay, so it's not an... Christ tells his disciples in many places to pray continually, but he does not tell them that prayer is easily answered. It is not an easy matter to obtain response from a higher level to requests coming from a lower level. Only persistence and intensity can cause the higher level to respond. And I've talked about this, I think, before in these books. Like my older brother, was talking about the man, the thief on the cross next to Christ that says, remember me in paradise. Well, he's at a very intense level of consciousness because he's dying. He has a few minutes left in his life. And so like your whole life can flash before you and you have a really deep, intense level of consciousness with which he is asking that. You know what I mean? He's not just like casually, hey, will you remember me in paradise? You know, as we would read it as just passing by, you know, but it's like if someone's dying and you're like, God, please remember this person in paradise. I hope that they are with you. And like, you know, I'll sometimes pray now for someone in the past because God's above time. And I'm just like, please give that person a few minutes, you know, a few seconds to like surrender everything and ask for your forgiveness or ask for your love or ask for your mercy or however that works. Let them get in that intense presence. Only persistence and intensity, I think, can cause the higher level to respond. The difficulty is shown as being like the difficulty of prevailing upon a man in bed to get up. They're not that motivated. Or a worldly judge to render justice to a widow. Christ taught that in regard to prayer and getting help for it, matters are just as they are on earth, as when a man asks for help from people who are reluctant to give it. But in the case of prayer, it's not actually a question of reluctance, but a difficulty inherent in the nature of things. What is lower is not in contact with what is higher. Understand this point clearly. The lower is not in direct contact with the higher. God and man are not on the same level. The whole conception of the invisible aspect of the universe or spiritual world implicit in the teaching of the Gospels is that there are higher and lower levels, distinct from one another. And it is arranged in an order of what is above and what is below. That is, in the levels. The lower is not in direct touch with the higher, as the ground floor of a house is not in direct touch with the top floor. And so, to reach what is above, many difficulties stand in the way, which makes it look as if there were reluctance it makes it look as if there was reluctance on the part of the higher level to respond to the lower. It's not a question of reluctance, but it seems like it to the human mind, and so is illustrated in such terms by Christ as the above comparisons, which show that great effort is necessary in order to obtain any response to prayer. And it's no wonder, see, I trust that these examples come up. They're not just me rambling. They come up for a reason. Drew didn't come up. He's like an angel. I promise that guy is. He's like an angel in my life. So he's an angel in our video. Angel is a messenger. It's like a conveyance from the divine through that person to us. Elliot was like an angel, and he called me Angelina, my friend Elliot Smith. Don't go home, Angelina, my little angel, And then in Dancing on the Highway, he says, a lost love, that's me, that likes to haunt me, is waiting around to meet me when I die. But, when we die to running after the glories of this world, or whatever the substances, whatever all that he was running after, I knew that as soon as he chose sobriety, then I would work with him. And I mean, I loved him every moment of every day, but I just had this knowing we'd work together, but I didn't know we'd work together when he actually died. I didn't hear that song until after he died. But what I was going to say about that is, how I mentioned George MacDonald's book, The Princess and the Goblin, and it just seemed like I'm randomly saying that. I didn't read ahead. Like, I read this book years ago. I don't know how many years, but in that book, she keeps getting lost trying to go up the stairs to her great-great-grandmother, which is like the connection to the divine. Only when she totally gives up, but she still has this longing to reach her great-great-grandmother, sometimes she finds the right stairs and she goes up. And sometimes she gets lost, and it's not until she's crying that she reaches this level of intensity that she remembers where to find, the right staircase, or it appears to her, And so these stairs are levels that George MacDonald is putting in his fairy stories, because he's so connected to the spirit, Holy Spirit. C.S. Lewis said that every one of his books is quoting indirectly or directly George MacDonald. George MacDonald is like, he's amazing to teach you these same truths. So it was that higher part of me that brought up, go listen to that playlist, because it looks like just a kid's book, and it's not. I started reading it because there were lots of people stuck at home a long time ago, and I wanted to give them a resource. But I didn't know what all I was doing, but I knew that's an important, beautiful book. I gave the companion to it to Elliot when he was still here. I love that man. All right, so it's not a question of reluctance, but it seems like that to the human mind, and so is illustrated in such terms by Christ in the above comparisons, and show what great effort is necessary in order to obtain any response to prayer. It is as if a man who prayed in earnest had to throw something up to a certain height by an intensity of purpose before he could expect to make anyone hear or get any response. And failing to do so, failing to make the request rightly, failing to throw it up to a high enough level, thought he was praying in vain, to someone who was reluctant to do anything and so began to be faint-hearted. And he must insist a man's prayer, a woman's prayer, her aim, her request, his request must be persisted in. It must go on in spite of not being answered. He must have shameless impudence. She must. As Christ says, he must pray continually and not faint. She must pray continually and not be faint of heart. Have the lion's courage. Ask God for courage to stay persistent in your prayer. This expression, not faint, means in the original, not behave badly. He must pray continually and not behave badly in regard to all the difficulties connected with praying. The necessity of sincerity in prayer is the next subheading. Christ speaks sometimes of the attitude from which a man or a woman must praise. It is useless to pray from a wrong attitude, and so a man or woman must look into herself and see from what is in herself she prays, because no communication with a higher level is possible through what is insincere and false in her or in him. Only what is sincere and genuine in her can touch a higher level. For example, any trace of vanity or self-conceit or arrogance stops communication with the higher level. That is why so much is said about the purification of the emotions in the Gospels. For the greatest impurity in a man, and the one most constantly pointed out in the parables and sayings of Christ, comes from the feeling of self-righteousness, self-excellence, self-merit, and superiority, and so on. This is why we could get caught up in trying to do some kind of works to reach God. And it's not about that, but it is about this discipline and persistence. This is shown in the following parable, which is addressed to a certain person, which trusted in themselves that they were righteous and set all others at naught. All right, this is in Luke 18:10. Two men went up into the temple to pray. The one a Pharisee, religious leader and teacher, and other a publican, tax collector. They hated tax collectors back then because they swindled them out of their money and stuff like that. They just were like, ugh. All right. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus within himself, God, I thank you that I am not like the rest, not as the rest of men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I get. But the publican, standing afar off, would not even lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Pour out your mercy, pour out your divine love. Forgive me, I say unto you that this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone that exalts himself shall be humbled, but he that humbles himself shall be exalted. Okay, so then he goes on, Maurice Nicoll does, to pray, to enter into touch with a higher level, a man must know and feel that he is nothing in comparison with what is above him. But he must truly see... Surfer just went by. You must truly see that this is so, and not merely feel it, as by looking at the stars a man feels how small the earth is. This is feeling small by physical magnitude. A man must feel small through psychological magnitude. Unless a man feels he is nothing, prayer is useless in just a practical sense, as a match is useless if it's wet. It still looks like a match, but it's not going to light, That's a really good example. I think of a marriage, if one person is trying to keep pouring in and not setting good boundaries, and the other person is putting their energy out in stuff that's not of the marriage and keeping the fire contained in it, then it's kind of like the alchemy is hard. It doesn't really take place until the person who keeps pouring in looks how to set different boundaries and have a higher standard, and recognizes that the alchemy is not taking place. And it's just like leaving your hose on, and the water is just draining out everywhere. You would notice when your water bill goes up, if you're conscious, you can notice that and course correct, and your marriage, your relationship can go to a higher level. This is the level within yourself. Unless a man feels he is nothing, prayer is useless. Not as a masochist, but just as a practical sense, a match is useless as wet. A man is pure in his emotional life in proportion as he feels his own nothingness. Like Eliot sings, Everything means nothing to me. Everything means nothing to me, you know? His own ignorance, his own helplessness, and exactly the same idea is expressed by Christ when he speaks of doing things from oneself and not from one's vanity. Okay, so he says in Matthew 6, right? And when you pray, you shall not be as the hypocrites. Hypocrites means the masked ones, the ones that wear a mask, you know? They pretend to be religious and they pretend to themselves to be religious. For they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily, I say unto you, they have received their reward. But you, when you pray, enter into your inner chamber, and having shut the door, pray to thy Father, my father, mother, which is in secret, that thy Father, which seeth you in secret, shall recompense thee. Right? Go into this inner part of yourself, this deep essence that I was just talking about, that I did my video on this morning on how to break your old patterns, a 5-minute video. To enter into thine inner chamber and shut the door means to go right into the house of yourself, into the innermost room, and shutting the door on everything outer, like your senses and everything. That's what I was going to say. Pray. Don't take just my words or Maurice Nicoll's. I'll say it to you now. Like always, Red Elk would tell me, he was a Native American Christian shaman that I met with for 3 days, you know, and talked with over the phone after that. And he taught me a lot, but he said, don't just take my words and trust me. You know, test them, see what is true or why it's being said to you right now in this way, so you can understand it. I trust that God, the Holy Spirit, or whatever will reveal to you the truth of this, you know. So enter into your inner chamber and shut the door means to go right into the house of yourself, into the innermost room, and shutting the door and everything outer, to pray from this inner self that is not a servant of the public, you know, or vanity, you know, or an invented social myth, you know, like Elliot sang a song, he's like, so sick and tired of all these pictures of me, completely wrong, totally wrong. I'm not surprised at all when really, why should I be? You know, I have a ghost in every town. It's like all these pictures, these ideas of who Elliot is, you know, because he was famous in that way. And it's like, you have a social myth. We have this identity that we have in our minds. Like, I have to be a nice person, or I have to be a bad boy or a bad girl or whatever. I have to be strong. I have to be tough. Boys don't cry. Women cry, you know, or whatever. I have to be sensitive. I can't be smart or whatever. You know, so it's like we have this myth that we try to keep up. Okay, so he's like, no, go in your inner room that's apart from any of this stuff. And I have lots of videos that talk about that. This inner self that's not a servant of the public or an invented social myth, you know, what they say a person ought to be, or a seeker of rewards and success and outer praise. It is to pass beyond all connection with vanity or self-conceit. It is only the internal man and a man or a woman that can obtain response to prayer and communicate with a higher level. I pray, I cry all the time in my prayer, and I'm like, am I meant to be crying this hard? Anyway, the external worldly side of a man, the pretending man, cannot pray. All these instructions and many similar ones are about how to transmit messages to a higher level. They are practical instructions in the method of transmission of telepathy, which is only possible through real emotions. Wow, I could talk for hours and hours on that. I won't though. I can just say that I was doing a deep meditation one time because I was called into the meditation, and I was on this bus on a mystical trip, and I was speaking with Christ, but I could not see Christ. This is a really deep mystery. But then one of my friends that was on the bus, who's an artist, came up to me and was like, the strangest thing, I just saw Christ, and I was seeing Christ. And I'm like, you saw Christ? Because I was meditating deeply in this intense part of myself, and they thought I was just being vain and making up crap, you know, and I wasn't. I know I wasn't, because I didn't get it out of my mind from that. I got it in my spirit that this was the Christ I was speaking to, but I was blind in my inner eyes for a reason, and this person had sight, but I have feelings. I could feel that Christ was with me, if you believe these kinds of things. And so anyway, I was in a real emotion, and I was in a real surrender, and I was in this real belief that I was on a trip that I was meant to be on, that it was highly important for transformation in my life. So I was surrendered to that truth when I was there. I wish I could always live in that deep of a consciousness. I would love to, but I know I was there then, and that intensity, I don't know what grace brought forth, but that person saw Christ. And I was told to, in my inner spirit, in my mind, to enter in. I hope no one gets this. I want to pray, like no one gets this, that this is going to go onto the wrong ears, I make this look really boring on the outside so they won't get to this place, All right. So it was just shown to me, and it's like telepathy. I have, the monks have lots of experience with this, the desert fathers and mothers, because we don't as much sometimes in our day and age, because we're so, into social media and TV and something always going, and it's like, I spent this 30 days, Latoya Okia had this thing called Beast Mode. It was like $60 for her course. Amazing. She's like, commit to 30 days of turning off all TV, all radio, except for like uplifting songs or something, and barely, or all communication with your friends. Just tell them you're doing all communications, even with everybody, except for very necessary communications, so that you quiet everything, so that you can hear this inner you reconnect. It's like you plug back into the divine. Only real emotions can transmit. Only real emotions are telepathic. False emotions based on vanity and self-conceit cannot transmit. To get a response to prayer must be of a certain quality. It must fulfill certain conditions, and one is that it must originate from an absolutely pure and genuine emotional feelings. Like, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. I saw with my feelings. My other friend, who's an artist, saw with his mind's eye. It kept coming to me today. I didn't know why it was coming to me today. I was like, go away. I don't always want to remember that. But I'm like, you saw Jesus. You don't understand. That's so funny, because I have a picture of Jesus in my wallet that this man gave me on that same trip. Like, I'm seeing Jesus right now in the picture. It's this mystic picture. I'll hold it up while I'm reading. It's a great one to meditate with. Oh, look at my sparkly. I got sparkly fingernails because it's like our etheric body when you're meditating looks like this. Anyway, if you meditate a certain way. Anyway. It got scratched. It's not him crying, but it got scratched in my wallet. Here's the back. If you guys can read German, I don't know what this says. Let's see if it gets clear. Anyway. To get a response in prayer must be of a certain quality. It must fulfill certain conditions. And one is that it must originate from an absolutely pure and genuine emotional feeling. Otherwise, it cannot reach its goal. So man must purify himself, from your egotism, from self, in his emotional life. And this means he must develop emotionally. He must develop. It's like maturing emotionally, That is, he must begin to love his neighbor. Wow, that's what was just coming up to me in this prayer before, because they read the Shema Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Elohim Eloheinu. Listen, Israel, the Lord your God is one. Echad is one. I don't know if it's Echad or Elohim, Eloheinu. The Lord is from the oneness, that's how I understood it. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Red Elk would teach me your neighbor is yourself. You all are in the mind womb of God. So love your neighbor as yourself, as a different aspect of God in consciousness, soul in consciousness in a physical form. But it's like what I'll sometimes do here. It looks like different fingers, and then you see it's all together. It's one. We look like we're different, but it's like as you love your neighbor and pray for your neighbor, you're also praying that consciousness goes and heals yourself, but don't do it to heal yourself. Do it because you choose to love your neighbor. Anyway, it really helps me in my dating life. I'm like, just always be loving, and then you always feel loved, and you don't worry if you're dating or not dating or whatever. You can go years. It's whatever. Anyway, this is the first stage of emotional development. That is, he must love his neighbor. This is the first stage of emotional development taught by Christ. And how difficult it is to behave consciously to others. Even to those one imagines one loves already. You imagine you love them already. It's hard to love them. I know. Because your egotism gets in, and it's like you put Post-it notes all over them and you judge them according to your childhood experiences. You get your triggers, Remove those. Ask God to help you remove all of the Post-it notes of judgment you put all over you covered the person with Post-it notes, and just asked like this light, this shining light like the sun, to just burn all those Post-it notes, or the wind to blow them away, so you can see them as their soul selves, and just love them, like forgive them. They know not what they're doing. It doesn't mean keep inviting toxicity into your life. It just means I love that person with my whole heart. I love them so much. It's like open your heart to loving, So I put this on, I put it on over my head, drop down into your heart. It's like Native Americans, everything is sacred for them. And how difficult it is to behave consciously to others, even to those one imagines one loves already. Can you say you love beyond your self-love? It is only the emotions that lie beyond the self-love and the self-emotions that can communicate with anything beyond oneself. And after all, this might be expected. Once we come to think about the question, how can self-emotions communicate with other people? They communicate only with oneself. So you see why love of neighbor is insisted upon. In connection with praying, Christ says, ask and you shall receive. But a man must know what to ask means. Prayer is the means of getting a response from a higher level of the universe, so that its influences come down and enter momentarily into what is at a lower level. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Bring your kingdom, the kingdom of perfect love, onto this earth. We are made out of the earth. Adam means from the earth. It means like red, like the red earth. He's made out of that, but God breathed in him. We're also made in the image of and likeness of God. However you understand this, just understand it in a mystical way, at least, is that prayer is the means of getting a response from a higher level of the universe, so that it influences, permeates into, transmutes, transforms, alchemizes, turns lead into gold, turns this earth into back your soul self coming alive, like the acorn seed, instead of just being a seed, into the tree that produces much fruit. It's not the seed, it's the flower, and we think, and the seed has to break through its own shell and break through the ground, just like the cocoon I was talking about earlier. The caterpillar has to break through in order to become who you're meant to be. If we don't do this, and if we chicken out, we miss. You must be born again. It's not like saying one prayer and that's it. You can pray the prayer and ask Christ to be Lord, and then as you yield to that, the next step will be shown to you. And so you keep asking for help in each of those next steps and having humility. But it takes so much courage. I feel like it's like a dying every day. And I have to face all of my deepest fears every day to keep learning what it is to be sincere and not even to see myself as a victim and stuff like that. Let us consider what to ask means. Seen aright, the universe is response to request. The scientist works confidently, believing that he or she will get a response from the physical universe as a result of their experiments, theories, and efforts, which form his request, his or her request. That's the request. I'm going to put this and add this into the petri dish, and I'm requesting that there is going to be a response, and, if you look at the photon thing where they got what they expected, and when they were expecting a different answer, they got that. That's quantum physics stuff. I won't go into it right now, but it's really weird. Okay, this is prayer in one form. She gets a response if she finds the right way to ask. And this means if his request takes the right form. But to find the right form, the request takes time. Like Edison failed 1,000 times before, he invented light. Like Thomas Edison, right? I don't know how many times, but lots and lots and lots. And I think Disney went to, I don't remember, 300 banks before he got a loan, something more than that. Okay, so the request takes time, trouble, and effort. And not only shameless impudence, but also the feeling of certainty in the unknown. And that is faith. For example, I had this faith that I was on a mystic journey for some reason because I didn't want to go on this trip. And it was very scary for me to go on this trip. And so I knew, hold on, that it was happening for a reason that was beyond me. And so I just trusted, I had faith in that it was important. And so I trusted that God would work through it in deep and mysterious ways. And he has done so. I've lost maybe 50 pounds. And that's just what's happened in my physical appearance. I've changed completely if you guys go back to my first videos. Anyway, let us consider what to ask means. Seen aright, the universe is response to request. Anyway, we talked about that. But to find the right form of request takes time, trouble, and effort, more than just shameless impudence. Also the feeling of certainty in the unknown, that is faith. For example, the scientist, by his or her persistent request, has discovered and brought into communication with human life the forces of electricity and electromagnetics in general, which belong to another world. This is just reminding me, Elliot gave me the impression, he's passed on, but I got the impression, I'm not saying to communicate with the dead whatsoever, okay? I'm not saying that. Red Elk says not to do that. But I just got the impression, it's kind of like if it's your grandmother's birthday and you're just remembering her and then just some vision comes into your heart. It's kind of like that. I wasn't seeking him out necessarily then, or maybe I had been in a wrong way or whatever. No, I don't want to go into wrong and right and all that right now, but told me to look at now I forget what it's called, but there's some kind of instrument and you just put your hand over it and it starts making a noise. It's like you can play like a xylophone without touching this thing. It's electromagnetic. It's I forget what it's called. You can put it in the comments if you'd like. But I went to the place that Elliot and I would always go to. I just happened to look at their schedule after that, and they were having a person come, this place called Largo, and they were doing a demonstration of this thing. And I raised my hand when I was there if they asked, does anyone want to volunteer? And the guy called on me. There were all these other people with their hands. It was such a strange, mysterious, and I still don't know why. But anyway, it's just the same thing as electromagnetics and electricity in general, which belong to another world, an infra world, the world of electrons. And this guy's writing in the late 1800s, 1920s or something. This is response to request, Maurice Nicoll is. This is communication in one sense with another world. Now we perceive that we live in a ready-made universe of great complexity, very far beyond our comprehension, but we are sure that it will respond to our efforts. This is indeed our attitude to the universe, and one that we do not question. I mean, my friend Drew is wide open. Yesterday, day before yesterday, he did this thing where he walked over hot coals, him and this group of people that he was with. And so he just said it opened him up. He said, like, warriors, you would do something like that before they went into battle, and then they were just in love, but they had no fear, and so they didn't smell of fear. And so there's a lot of depth into that. I just wanted to mention that he had just walked on coals. He's in a very high state of consciousness right now. And it doesn't mean that you have to do that, like, but it's like being willing to die to yourself in deep, deep ways. Like, it feels like, I promise you, I know this from my own experience, and Elliot knows this from giving up the I won't say, that he was doing that kind of substance, because I don't know how they flag this stuff, but I know he gave that up. He was sober before he died. And I know, like, having to give up my own addictions. I had an addiction in my own flesh that it was like, hooked on a feeling. I'm high on believing you're in love with me. It's like, it was just like my skin was crawling, and I was in a fetal position on the ground, and I never did drugs. So, and I'm not saying I'm high and mighty like that other guy. I'm just saying I haven't, for my own reasons, whatever you want to call it. I won't go into it right now, because let's stay with the book. But I'm saying, like, it feels like you're dying to say no to that thing. You're like, I have to go take that thing. You feel like you're going to die. Like, it's so weird. It's like, if I don't take this, I'm going to die. And then you sit through it and you ask God for grace and for help, and people will show up and help you, or, someone will just bring water to you or something. Like, something happens, some grace happens, and you're like, wow, I'm still alive. And I didn't think I would live through this, Always, when you're in your worst moment, just ask the divine to help you through that. Always, you can. And divine will, because you're asking sincerely. It's like you hit rock bottom. And so I know that feeling. And you're worth it. If you're from another world, you're worth asking this other world. Our citizenship is in heaven. I said that in the 5-minute video this morning, not knowing that I would be reading this book today. This is the same. This is like the same cover that Drew just showed me of his book of 9 or whatever his book was, That, I'm not kidding. Like, it was like weird esoteric circle like that with a bunch of eyes, and I have 2 copies of this. So I have a different one that doesn't have the same cover. Anyway. All right. We live in a ready-made universe of great complexity, very far beyond our comprehension, but we are sure that it will respond to our efforts. This is indeed our attitude to the universe, and one that we do not question. We are sure that if we try to find out how to make something, we shall be given a result. When you cook food, you get a response exactly according to the form of your request. If the results are not what you expected, you're getting a wrong response, not because the universe is at fault, but because the form of your request is wrong. You do not know how to ask rightly. You don't have the right recipe, or you mixed up something, in the recipe. But don't be frustrated. Like, God will always teach you. That's why you're seeing this video right now. Someone said, oh, you thought God broke your heart? Like, he expanded your heart, because how can you be broken right now when you're watching this video that's teaching you how to heal your heart? You know what I mean? Like, just opens you up to more love, to flying higher as this butterfly. Like Elliot sings, future butterfly, gonna spend the day higher than high. Elliot's talking about these higher levels, higher than high. This is what, and higher than the high of what a substance can give you. It can't give you the high that we're looking for here. He's talking about higher states of consciousness. I know he would listen to this one Oasis song over and over again, faster than a cannonball. Where were you? Where were you? Well, we were getting high in higher consciousness state. Where were you? Why did you stay in this lower consciousness state, in this lower acorn state, the seed form, when you could get to this high place? You have the calling within you. Listen to it. Go to these higher places. like Bob Marley says, all of his songs are teaching about higher consciousness. Christ is always teaching about higher consciousness. Elliot was always singing about higher consciousness. I'm always teaching about higher consciousness. Whether I know it or not, I'm in it. I'm deep in it. And this is why Elliot and I found each other and loved each other so deeply, you know? And this is why I'm doing this for you, because I love you. I love you. I love you. This is indeed our attitude to the universe, and one that we do not question. We are sure that if we try to find out how to make something, we shall be given a result. When you cook food, you get a response exactly according to the form of your request. If the results are not what you expected, you are getting a wrong response, not because the universe is at fault, but because the form of your request is wrong. Tony Robbins always said that. Ask better questions and you'll get better answers. Do the discipline to find better questions. If you keep saying, why is he rejecting me? It's like, why are you looking for your worth outside yourself? You know, the kingdom of God is within you. You don't need the external validation. That's what the suffering is keep pointing to you. Suffering, like Buddha talks a lot about the suffering. It's because you're attached to that external thing and the answer is within you, right? Ask a different question. Why do you keep looking outside yourself? You know? You do not know how to ask rightly, and so you must learn how to cook better. That is, how to ask better. To ask is to request. If we did not live in a universe, visible and invisible, that gives a response to the right request, whatever the nature of that response, good or evil, you know, if you keep asking for bad, you'll get that in a way. But neither the scientist nor the man or woman who prays for inner help could expect to obtain any response. Nevertheless, to obtain a response is not always easy. Certain conditions must be fulfilled. In regard to prayer as a request or asking, it must not be mechanical or a mere matter of repetition, of thinking that much speaking, you know, Jesus says those people are there in the streets and they're doing it from much speaking. No. We say the Our Father every day. I say it every day in my meditation, and I always say it a different way. It's like Billie Holiday sings her songs a different way every time she sings them, you know. I go into this beautiful, weird place, you know, where it's like, give me today, this day of my life, all of the love that I need, the daily bread, the super substantial, that which is beyond the substance. Give me my physical bread. I need to ask for that more. Like, give me my physical bread, but help me see beyond that in every time, even if I'm tired, if I didn't get enough sleep, even if I'm worn out from work or from doing this or whatever I'm doing, you know, I love this, but, you know, give me enough bread so I have no excuse not to be loving to the person. Oh, it was just 1:12:12. Next to me, you know, the person that's in front of me, to love you guys, to be loving to myself and not be hard on myself and mean, but be forgiving and it's a hard reset, you know. It's like, I love you. I love you. I begin again. I start all over. I accept the forgiveness and the mercy that's offered me and just start like a little child again that just asks, hey, can I have this? You know? I think I need this. Show me what I really need and give me what I think I need if you think I need this. If not, help me ask for something higher, right? So it's certain conditions must be fulfilled. In regard to prayer as a request or asking, it must not be mechanical. You know, you're habitual just saying the words mechanically, or a mere matter of repetition of thinking that much speaking will give a result. It's not the quantity, but the quality of the prayer that is important. The mere repetition of words is unavailing. Christ said, in praying, use not vain repetitions, you know? And I say the same thing. It's just like I say, I love you to someone, and it means something different. It means something deeper, hopefully, every time I see them, every time I say it, every time I say it to myself, every time I say it to my kids, every time I say it to another person, you know, because I'm a deeper person. I'm in deeper consciousness, sometimes deeper and higher. And, you know, and so it's, even though I'm saying the same word, if I'm doing it not mechanically, if I'm just repeating it mechanically, where am I going to get that deeper love? They're not going to feel my presence in that. Just say, I love you, you know. I look at my kids, I'm like, I love you. Look at me, you know. I love you. And I don't need them to see that always. They know it in how I am. And as we have already seen, prayer must be persisted in. A man must have some idea, or a woman, about what she is asking for, and must persist in her request and his request, and believe that it is possible to obtain a result. And just as a scientist in her particular mode of prayer to the natural universe, because they're asking for the result in like chocolate chip cookies or a science experiment, makes a request. Once she has the idea that she can discover something and feels it's possible, and modifies again and again his or her request by trial and error and by ingenuity until she or he obtains a response through finding the right request. And so a man who prays to the spiritual universe must have the same faith, patience, and intelligence and power of inventiveness. A man must work and labor to invent in regard to his own development or her own development as much as the scientist must in regard to making a new discovery. The scientist, there's a song by Coldplay called The Scientist. It's really, really sweet. There's a woman who sings it. I heard her in Turkey at the Magic Coffee Shop, and I knew I had to write it down because it was just speaking on such a deep level to my soul. So anyway, the scientist will get a response. I think I'm going to go roller skate down to that after this. The scientist will give a response if things are right as regards to the request, and so will the man or woman who prays if his request is right for himself. But he must know himself and understand what to request. To ask something that is impossible or ask what will only harm oneself is to ask wrongly. If you ask for vain stuff, then you're just asking for something lower, and then you're asking to harm yourself if you keep expecting the universe to give you that. What are we to ask for in prayer? Oh good, there's only one more page. Good. I was like, I'm not going to go much longer because this video is getting long. Request in prayer, right? What are we to ask for in prayer? In the prayer that Christ formulated for his disciples when they asked him how to pray, all ordinarily personal wishes are apparently ruled out. But since everything said in the Gospels is about reaching the higher level of inner evolution possible for man, your transformation, your theosis, God became man so that man could become God, is what the Orthodox say. That's called theosis. So all ordinarily personal wishes are apparently ruled out. But since everything said in the Gospels is about reaching the higher level of inner evolution possible for man and woman, called the kingdom of heaven, it is not surprising that it has a non-earthly quality. Yet in view of its object, it could not be more personal. The Lord's Prayer is about self-evolution. The opening phrase marks the higher level. Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. That is, may communication be established between the higher and the lower. A connection between earth and heaven is asked for. This is the first request, and you will understand that this means reaching a definite emotional state for these words to be said with any intensity of meaning. In other versions, it is our Father in heaven. A man might well spend, and in the Gospel of Philip, I think, or Thomas, even though it's a Gnostic Gospel, it was found with the Essenes in Qumran, as part of their books. I won't argue about that, but I think it says Christ addresses it as our Father and Mother. This is what I'm taught. I haven't read it really deeply yet. I haven't been called specifically to it, but a man might well spend a minute. I have some. There's a guy named Ted Nottingham that talks about all of this very deeply. He talks about Maurice Nicoll and the Fourth Way and all this stuff. Really good. He's really great in my opinion, but use your own discernment. I love him though. And he goes way deep into all of this stuff and the gospel and the Gnostic Gospels. I'm not saying to go into heresy, but it's like heresy to reduce God to this big sometimes too, The Catholics think the evangelicals are a type of, not heresy, but a one-off or way off. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's not about fighting. Just, okay. Hallowed be Father. Hallowed be Father, Mother. Hallowed be thy name. Holy is this deeper essence of yourself. Your name, what your name conveys. Your name conveys all that is divine love. God is love. It's holy. It's set apart. It's not in just this earthly realm. It's in us, like the Christ in us, the hope, this shining hope of glory. Christ said, I am the light of the world. You are the light of the world. Thy kingdom come. Okay, so this is the first request, and you will understand that it means reaching a definite emotional state. Our Father in heaven, a man might well spend a minute, an hour, or a lifetime before he reached the emotional perception of the meaning of these opening words, which must be said consciously. Then comes the request for daily bread, which does not mean little bread, but transubstantial bread. Oh, like I said, the super substantial. That's what my brother taught me. Transubstantial bread. The meaning of the original word is unknown. It's deeper than the known words. But its intention is spiritual bread, or food that nourishes the understanding of a man in the struggle to raise himself to a higher level, or herself. It's like, I need this spiritual sustenance that changes these atoms from normal communication to the higher communication. Connect me. It's like, beam me up, connect me, not beam me up, beam up my telepathic thoughts and wishes and deeper, so that it's transmuted down to me, and I get the higher communication within myself too. So give us this day this transubstantial bread. The meaning of the original word is unknown, but its intention is spiritual bread, a food that nourishes the understanding of a man or woman in the struggle to raise herself to a higher level. Then comes the request to be forgiven as we forgive others. This means that to reach a higher level is absolutely necessary, first of all, to cancel the debts of others recorded in that account book we all keep. Like I said, blowing off all the post-it notes we put on them, because as we put post-it notes and judge them by this external thing, oh, it's 6:33 here. I know it seems so much later, but Matthew 6:33 is seek first the kingdom of God. Like, I'll show you. Look. So you see, that's what we're talking about right now. This is how, when you enter these higher levels of consciousness, things like this show up for you. Seek first the kingdom of God and God's right wayness, and all these things shall be added to you as well. And so when I think of cancel the debts, I say, I give all their debts to you, God. You will take care of that. I cancel, because I can't carry all the debts of myself and other people. That's just too many debts to hold on to, and it blocks love from flowing. And if I'm blocking love, if God is love, I'm blocking the love that wants to flow through me. Jesus said something like, if you don't forgive your brothers or your sisters, neither will I forgive you, because you're not experiencing forgiveness, because your heart's closed off, in resentment, resentment. You keep sending them back the bill. I have lots of videos talking about that, so I won't get into that. So cancel the debts of others recorded in that account book. I think it might be in How to Hack Your Life video. It's a really good video. Recording that account book that we all keep in our memories of what we imagine we are owed by the bad behavior of others to us and their lack of consideration to ourselves. Someone said yesterday, if you spot it in others, it's a spot in yourself, And so learn how to ask for forgiveness sincerely and receive it. And then you just genuinely give it to other people, because you see how much, God canceled like $1 million worth of debt for you, and what they owed you was like $100 compared to that. It's true. Once you get into this deep, desperate state, it's not, oh, it was 122.22, all right. Not to forgive others is to keep oneself held down and chained to the earth. We imprison ourselves, fasten ourselves down, keep ourselves where we are. If we cannot cancel debts, we can't fly this higher place. Where were you while we were getting high? Higher than high, in Elliot's song and the Oasis song. We forgive others. Okay, so if we cannot cancel debts as we forgive others, so we are forgiven for our innumerable mistakes, failures, and in the growth of our own understanding, that is, in our own evolution. Then comes the strange request, not to be brought into temptation, but let us realize that no man can undergo inner evolution and a development of understanding without temptation, and that the nature of this kind of temptation is different from what people usually regard as temptation, when they associate with the flesh and its weaknesses. For example, okay, he'll give us an example. We are always being tempted to misunderstand or understand wrongly. When a man or woman sets herself to the development indicated in the Gospels, he becomes tempted by all sorts of doubts and disbeliefs and extraordinary inner difficulties of understanding which she or he must pass through, where her and his human reasoning powers, based on the evidence of your senses, fail him completely. They fail you. You can't do it from your outer senses. They fail you. Like, I can't see what God is trying to do through me sometimes, or why would you take that away from me? I loved that, I thought I loved with a pure love. Perhaps not. fine, take it away. I've been asking and asking and asking, what is spiritual poverty? Because St. Ignatius talks about asking for spiritual poverty. And so far I've got that it means, God will teach you detachment from all things. Like if I see zero in my bank account and know that I have like trillions of dollars worth of wealth and abundance within me, then I can't go by just my outer senses. Like I can look and I can go, well, I might need to do something about that if that's the case, move things around if I can, or ask divine, then what's the next step? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to not eat, or did I spend wrongly, or whatever? I don't know, but you can't depend. You have to have eyes of faith. We walk by faith, not by sight. Your senses, it's like, oh, if I only want to indulge my senses, like I know how to do that. And I know where that gets me, it gets me to be a slave to my senses and never feeling like you have enough, and always just resenting the other person because they can't fill you up, in that way, they can't. Anyway, so all sorts of doubts and disbeliefs and extraordinary inner difficulties of understanding which he must pass through, or she must pass through, where human reasoning powers based on the evidence of the senses fail him completely, and the only certainty that there is something, only the conviction that the path he or she is on leads somewhere. In short, only his faith, her faith, can assist her or assist him. For faith means not only certainty beyond any sense-based proof, but a conviction of possibilities before one has realized them. It's like believing the I'm possible and the impossible. You just put the space in between that, the space which God lives in between that space. It becomes I'm possible. In Christ, all things are possible. In God, all things are possible. Because we're talking about this mystic divine power that comes to this earth. But Noah is like building this ark before he even knows or understands what it's all for, People make fun of him for, like, I don't remember how many years he built that ark, looking like an idiot to the outward people who are just looking with their outer senses, But he had a faith that God is not cruel. He wouldn't be having him make an ark for no reason, That's our life. So it's not blind faith either. You get confirmations. Like I got Drew showing up in the middle of a video and me talking about things this morning and in the beginning of this video that we're reading about now, It's faith based on something real. It is like real science, but anyway, faith means not only certainty beyond any sense-based proof, but a conviction of possibilities before one has realized them. And so Christ says in one place, all things whatsoever ye pray for and ask for, have faith that you have received them, and ye shall have them. This is why they say feel them and know what it's like, Sometimes I feel like the arms of divine just like loving me and holding me, and I feel so loved. And I'm just like, I don't care if this ever happens in my physical earth again. And if it does happen, I know it will feel like that. So it's like I pray that I just get to stay in the arms of the divine, whether it gets to happen in this physical life or not. It's like, but pray and ask in faith that you have received it. Like whatsoever you pray for, ask for, have faith that ye have received it, and ye shall have them. I don't, anyway, manifesting stuff talks about this, but and there's different translations of this verse, but notice then that you must have a thing before you receive it. You have to have it. See, I have it in my internal world. That's why I don't care if it shows up in the external world. On some days, what is that song? All by myself, if I go into some child mode where I felt lonely or something, but that I just get hooked into it briefly, anyway. And I'm sharing this because this is all of us, if you thought you were doing so great in your job and you had this great identity. It's like these superstar athletes. I keep meeting a lot of professional athletes, and it's like when their profession is over, it's like, wait, who am I? I thought I was all this. And it's like, no, you were always something beyond that, And so it's like, Christ says in one place, okay, so you ask, okay, notice that then you must have a thing before you receive it. You must act as if you have what what you as yet have not, and you shall have it. Okay, so he says you must act as if you have what you as yet don't have, have not, and you shall have it. This seems very strange, but everything that has to do with establishing connection with the higher level and all the instructions concerning the nature of the effort required seems strange. I'm thinking that seems strange, like the Doors song anyway. Consider, would not a seed think instructions about becoming a flower strange? To pass from one level to even the first beginnings of another level is to pass through very difficult temptations of which no one who is content with himself as he is has any idea. But the key to understanding the Lord's Prayer lies in the opening phrase. It is prayer about reaching a higher level. May thy kingdom come. We're asking for a higher kingdom, a kingdom of divine love, not human love. May I come into thy kingdom. May the will of heaven of a higher level be done on me as earth. And the last request, not be tempted too much beyond one's strength, concerns that endeavor. For many things stand in the way. And as it is put in the allegories of the Old Testament, God wrestles with man and seeks to overcome and even slay him. This is how the struggle to lift oneself off the level one is at, up to a new level is expressed. It is as if this very thing one prays for and wishes becomes an enemy opposing every step made. But if we remember that the reaching of a high level means a transformation and rebirth, like I was saying, of oneself, the idea becomes plain. A man as he is cannot reach a higher level. He cannot approach God as he is. The higher level is bound to oppose him as long as he remains the same kind of man. A couple of paragraphs left. Now, all these requests are about reaching another state. The Lord's Prayer is wholly about this goal. It's not about life. It shows in brief, apart from all else said in the parables and teaching about the same thing, that the meaning of prayer essentially is to reach a higher level, and that all prayer should be about this, and that a man in praying should think primarily of this and request more than all else what is necessary for this to be attained. For this is the supreme aim. Jesus says, join my telos. This is the aim. Entole. It says, you must keep my commandments. But he's saying, keep my aim. Stay on this high aim with me. Like Tony Robbins said, it's 6:44 now. There's some verse with that. He said, have a higher standard. Make this now that you'll never go back from this higher standard. I choose to commit to this high standard. This flag that I choose to live under, to be this soldier for these beautiful high kingly things, queenly things. For this is the supreme aim. Christ defined this: seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. That is the highest possible level. That was Matthew 6:33. That is what a man must really ask for in praying, or a woman. And since this is the supreme aim of prayer, a man or woman in praying ought to connect whatever lesser aim he asks for with the supreme aim. Take all my lower aims, like I said, make them the high aim. Make me see that, this want for this love outside is really about this longing for union inside with my soul self, and to live within my soul self, and my soul self in union with the divine, to stay plugged in so that love can flow through me to you, to everybody. There's one more sentence. Okay. And since this is a supreme aim of prayer, a man or woman in praying ought to connect whatever lesser aim she or he asks for with the supreme aim, which is the supreme meaning of man, and leads to the highest possible level he or she can reach. It's the supreme meaning. Human is, or like Jerusalem is like hero, the hero path, the peace path of the hero. Jerusalem is like the hero path,